Give me the smallest room you have." The man stood in the doorway of the Sparrow and Bell, with the last of the summer light behind him, and Delia Bray knew within 3 words that he was lying about something. Not about the room, about himself. A man who wanted the smallest room did not arrive in boots like that, oxblood leather worn soft at the ankle and dusty only at the toe. The kind a London bootmaker measured twice and charged a year's ale money for. He had the road in his coat and the heat of the day on him, and he asked for the smallest room the way another man might ask for a glass of water in a drought, as though he had walked a long way to be allowed to want very little. "The smallest," Delia repeated. She set down the tankard she had been polishing. The taproom smelled of beeswax, and the elderflower cordial cooling in the cellar, and through the open casement came the green, trampled scent of the verge where the bath coach had churned the dust an hour before. "We have a box room under the eaves that the swallows think is theirs. You'd share with a nesting pair, and a great deal of straw." "That will do." "It will not do," she said, "and I won't let it to you. You'd crack your head on the beam before you'd unlaced one boot." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, but the ghost of where one had once lived. He was younger than his stillness suggested, 26, with dark hair that wanted cutting, and a jaw shaded with 2 days of travel. Handsome in the way that made a careful woman more careful, not less. His eyes went once around the room, the low blackened beams, the warped settle by the cold hearth, the row of pewter she kept bright, because her father had kept it bright, and she had the oddest sensation that he was not pricing the place but envying it. "Then the next smallest," he said. "Whatever is cheapest. I am not particular." "You are remarkably particular," Delia said. "You've been particular about being unparticular for a full minute now." This time the ghost smile nearly took. He drew a hand from his coat and set a coin on the bar between them, and it was the coin that decided her. Not copper. Silver, and good silver, laid down too gently. The way a man sets down a thing when he has never in his life had to count what leaves his hand. She did not take it. "Have you a name, sir?" "Hale," he said. "John Hale." The pause before the John was the length of a held breath, and she heard it the way she heard a cracked note in the church organ. Small, certain, impossible to unhear. "Well, Mr. Hale." Delia reached behind her for a key, and her fingers passed over the row of them, the box room, the 2 road rooms that smelled of other men's pipes, and stopped, against every scrap of her own good sense, on the iron key worn smooth as a riverstone. "I'll give you a special one." The smallest room she owned was not for letting. It sat at the corner of the house above the kitchen, so that the bread warmth came up through the boards in winter. One window faced the orchard, and one the road, and her father had slept there 40 years and mended the world's harness by its light. She had not given it to a soul since the fever took him 2 winters gone. She did not entirely know why she gave it now, except that the man wanted to be small and unseen, and that room knew how to hold a person who wanted to be left alone without letting them be lonely. "It's no larger than your box room," she said, leading him up the crooked stair, the candle throwing their shadows long against the limewash. "But the roof doesn't leak, and the bed doesn't bite, which is more than the eaves can promise. Mind the 3rd step. It sings." The step sang. He said nothing, but she felt him notice, felt the whole careful machinery of the man register the loose board and file it away, as though he expected, even here, to need to know which stairs would announce him. She opened the door. The room breathed out at them. Lavender from the press, old wood, the faint, cool smell of a chamber that has been swept and aired and waited. Evening light lay across the coverlet in a long amber bar. Beyond the orchard window the apple boughs hung heavy and green, and far off, where the hills went blue, a bruise of cloud promised the night's thunder. Mr. Hale stood very still on the threshold. "This is not the cheapest room," he said. "No, I asked for the cheapest room." "You did." Delia set the candle on the press and turned the coverlet down with 2 practiced flicks. "And I'm the keeper of this house, and I give the rooms as I see fit, and I've seen fit to give you this one. You may argue with me about the price, Mr. Hale, but you'll lose, because I've been losing arguments to travelers for 2 years, and winning them all in the end." He looked at her then, properly, for the first time, as a person, and not a doorway, and whatever he saw seemed to cost him something to look at. "Why?" he asked. It was not a small question. She answered it as though it were. "Because you came in asking for the least a man can have," she said, "and I've a contrary nature, and it's a warm night. Supper's at 8 if you want it. Cold fowl and a pie. The cordial's good. The ale's better." She paused at the door. "Sleep where you've a mind to fall, sir. The swallows will manage without you." She left him standing in the amber light with his single bag and his 2 good boots, and went down the singing stair, and told herself firmly that she had given away her father's room to a liar, because it was good for trade to keep the road rooms free, and that she believed not one word of it. He did not come down for supper. Delia sat at the scrubbed kitchen table with Mrs. Pruitt, the pie cooling between them and the moths blundering at the rushlight, and tried to make the day's accounts come out to a different sum than they had come out to yesterday. They would not. The column of what was owed sat fat and smug at the foot of the page, and the column of what came in sat under it, thin as a Lenten broth. "He'll not eat," said Mrs. Pruitt, who had cooked for the Sparrow and Bell since before Delia could reach the breadboard, and who carried her opinions the way she carried her great copper pans, out front, where everyone could see them coming. Gentlemen of that sort never do, the first night. They sit in the dark and brood over whatever sent them running, and in the morning they eat like a harvest gang. "He's a Mr. Hale," Delia said. "He's no sort of gentleman. He told me so himself, 4 separate ways." "And you believed him?" Mrs. Pruitt cut the pie with the flat conviction of a woman settling a wager. "I've buried 2 husbands, and a deal of common sense, my girl. But I know a quality coat when it walks under my lintel. That one's running from a house with more rooms than ours has spoons." She slid a wedge onto a plate and pushed it across. "You gave him the master's room." It was not a question, so Delia did not answer it. She ate her pie. Outside, the thunder that had been threatening all evening cleared its throat over the hills and thought better of it, and the warm dark pressed at the windows, full of midges and the smell of cut hay from the glebe field. "He's 3 days' silver in his purse, and the look of a man who's not slept under his own name in a fortnight, Mrs." Pruitt went on. "Comfortably. I'll wager you a week's eggs he's bolting from a wedding. His own or his brother's." She wiped the knife. "If I may say so, you'd do better to wonder how we're to find Mr. Pell's money by Lammas than to wonder what colour a stranger's secrets are." There it was, the name laid on the table like a cold coin. Pell. Delia's stomach folded over on itself the way it did every time, a small private clench she had grown almost fond of. The way one grows fond of a bad tooth for the company of it. "We'll find it," she said. "From where?" "From the road. The season's near done. Half the ton will be rattling back to the country in a month, and every one of them wants a clean bed between Bath and London, and ours is the cleanest 12 miles either way." She heard her own brightness, and disliked it, the way she disliked the sound of her voice when it worked too hard. "We'll fill the rooms. We'll find it. Near enough." Mrs. Pruitt looked at her for a long moment over the rushlight, and there was a softness in it that Delia could not bear, because softness was the one thing in the house she had no answer for. "Your father," the old woman began, "would have done exactly as I'm doing, and slept the better for it." Delia stood and gathered the plates, brisk as a wind. "Leave the stranger his secrets, Prue. We've enough of our own to be going on with." But when she carried a covered plate up the singing stair an hour later, cold fowl, a heel of the good bread, because a man might be too proud to come down to supper, but no man was ever too proud to find it left outside his door, she stopped on the landing with her hand raised to knock, and did not knock. From within the master's room came a sound she knew and did not expect, the small dry scratch of a pen. Steady, patient, the sound of a man writing a letter he did not want to write, in a hand he meant no one to read, by the light she had given him. She set the plate down on the boards, without a word, and went away down the stair, and the third step sang under her, and she heard the pen stop. He ate like a harvest gang. She would have to tell Mrs. Pruitt, who would be insufferable about it. By the time Delia came down at first light to rake the kitchen fire, the plate from the landing sat washed and dried on the dresser, set there by his own hand, and the man himself was in the orchard. She watched him a moment through the open kitchen door before he knew she was there. The morning was already warm, the dew burning off the long grass in a low gold smoke, and Mr. Hale stood under the oldest of the apple trees with his coat off and his shirt sleeves rolled, looking up into the branches as though they were a problem he had been set. The swallows cut and stitched the bright air over the stable roof. Somewhere down the lane a cart was coming, the slow clop and creak of it, and over the hills the day stood clean and cloudless, the threatened storm gone east in the night, without breaking. "The boughs want propping," she said, coming out with the egg basket on her hip. "Before the fruit comes on. We lost a limb of that tree 2 summers back for want of a crutch under it." He turned. In daylight, with the sleep washed off him, he was harder to dismiss and easier to mistrust. Rested, the watchfulness in him had a sharper edge. "You lost the limb," he said, "or you lost the keeper who would have propped it." The accuracy of it went through her like the cold of the cellar floor through a thin shoe. She set the basket down on the wall. "Both," she said. "Near enough. You've a forward way of guessing, Mr. Hale, for a man who told me 4 times he was nobody in particular. I find that nobody in particular is permitted to notice things," he said, "where a particular somebody is only permitted to ignore them politely." He looked back up into the tree. "I will prop your boughs if you have the timber. I am better with my hands than I have lately been allowed to be." "Allowed," she repeated. "A figure of speech. It was 4 figures of speech," Delia said, "and I'm keeping a tally." But she went and fetched him the chestnut poles from the lean-to, and showed him the forked ends her father had cut, grey now and split at the tips, and stood in the burning gold of the morning, while a duke she did not yet know was a duke shouldered the weight of an apple bough, and eased a worn crutch under it as gently as a man settling a sleeper's head upon a pillow. He worked without speaking, and well, and the working changed something in his face, loosened it, the way warm water loosens a knot. She found she did not want to go and rake the fire. She found she wanted, with a foolishness that alarmed her, to know what he had written in the night, and to whom, and why the pen had stopped when the steps sang. "You'll stay how long?" she asked, when the last pole was set. He straightened, wiping his palms down his thighs, and for a moment he looked at the prop tree as though it were the only honest thing he had done in a 12-month. "I have not decided," he said. "Is that permitted?" "At 6pence a night, sir. You may be as undecided as you please." She picked up the basket. "Breakfast is." The cart she had heard in the lane came round the holly at the bend, and Delia's tongue stopped in her mouth. It was not a farm cart. It was a gig, black lacquered and town-built, the kind that belonged to a man who was paid to call on people who did not want to see him, and the man driving it wore a bottle-green coat she knew the way a sheep knows the dog. Mr. Pell, Quarterday's own clerk, with a face like a closed account, and a leather case on the seat beside him that she could have described in her sleep, for it had haunted enough of her sleep already. "Friend of yours?" Mr. Hale asked, very quietly. She noticed, the way one notices a change of pressure before a storm, that he had stepped half a pace back into the shadow of the propped tree and turned his shoulder to the lane, a man making himself smaller, a man who did not wish to be seen by a gig from town. "No friend," Delia said. "Go inside, Mr. Hale, if you've a mind to keep your 6pences private. This won't be pretty, and it's none of yours." He did not go inside. Mr. Pell did not get down from the gig at once, which was his way. He let the horse stand, and the silence stretch, drawing on a pair of grey gloves he did not need in the heat, so that Delia might have a moment to feel the size of him against the small of her life. The morning smelled of horse and hot lacquer, and the dust his wheels had raised, and under it the green of the orchard seemed suddenly a child's thing, a paper garden. "Miss Bray." He had a voice like a quill being trimmed. "You are looking well. The summer suits the house. It suits the rooms, Mr. Pell, which are full," she lied, "and the cellar, which is fuller. So if you've come to drink, I can sell you a mug, and if you've come to talk, you may do it from where you sit, for I've eggs to set, and bread to start, and no time for a man who's only ever brought me bad arithmetic." He smiled at that, thinly, the way a cat smiles at a thing it has already decided about. He drew a paper from the leather case. She knew the paper. She knew the red wax on it, and the small hard seal pressed into the wax, and the sight of it made the eggs in the basket seem to grow heavier on her hip. "Sir Rowland is a patient man," Pell said. "But patience, Miss Bray, is a sum like any other, and his is spent. The debt your late father set against this freehold falls due at Lammas. The whole of it, this year. There is to be no more letting it run quarter to quarter. The whole, by the 1st of August, or the house and the land and the good bright pewter your father loved come to Sir Rowland, who means, the smile again, to pull it down and run his new coach road clean through the orchard. He has surveyed it already. The line goes, and he lifted one grey finger and drew it lazily through the air, directly through that pretty tree you have just propped. She had known the shape of it for a year. She had not known the date moved. The 1st of August was not 3 weeks off. "The agreement was Michaelmas," Delia said. Her voice came out level, and she was proud of it. "I've it in my father's hand. Michaelmas, and quarter by quarter." "The agreement was at Sir Rowland's pleasure," Pell said gently, "and Sir Rowland's pleasure has altered. You may read the clause. You signed beneath it." He held the paper out across the space between them, and would not bring the gig an inch closer, so that she must come to him for it, walk to him across her own yard in the gold morning with the basket on her hip, to take the news of her ruin from his gloved hand like a beggar taking bread. She set the basket on the wall. She took the first step. "I will read it," said Mr. Hale. He came out of the shadow of the apple tree quite slowly, rolling down one shirt sleeve and then the other, fastening the cuffs as he came, and Delia watched Mr. Pell watch him, watched the clerk's quick eye go over the dusty boots and the open collar and the 2 days' beard, and price him, and set him down as a hired man or a passing labourer, and dismiss him. "And you are," said Pell, "a guest of the house." Mr. Hale put out his hand for the paper, and there was nothing of the box room in the gesture now, nothing of the smallest room you have. The hand was steady and open, and entirely certain that the paper would be placed in it, and to Delia's astonishment, to her slow, cold, dawning astonishment, Mr. Pell placed it there. Some men are made to be obeyed in small things before anyone has reasoned out why, and the clerk's fingers had let go of the document before his face had finished deciding to allow it. Mr. Hale read. He read the way her father had read a strange harness, looking for where the strain would tell. The orchard was very quiet. A swallow dropped and rose. Far off the church clock at Wick Abbas told the half-hour, thin across the hay. "The clause permits the holder to call the sum entire upon a quarter's notice," he said at last. "It does not permit him to call it entire upon 3 weeks. This is dated the feast of John the Baptist." He turned the page to the light. "The 24th of June. A quarter from the 24th of June is the 29th of September. Michaelmas, as the lady says. Your master may have his money at Lammas, Mr. Pell, if the lady chooses to give it him early. He may not demand it. Not by this paper in this hand." Pell's smile did not move, but something behind it did. "And what," he said, "would a guest of the house know of the holding of debt?" "Very little," said Mr. Hale. "I am nobody in particular." He folded the paper along its old creases, neat as a man who had folded 1,000 such, and held it out, not across the gap but close, so that Pell must lean from the gig to retrieve it. "But nobody in particular can read a date. Take Sir Rowland his Michaelmas, and his survey, and his coach road, and tell him the orchard is spoken for until the autumn, at the least." For a moment Delia thought the clerk would strike at it some other way. His gloved hand closed on the paper. His pale eyes went from the stranger to Delia and back, and she saw him, behind the closed account of his face, begin a new sum she could not read. "As you say," Pell murmured. Michaelmas, he gathered the reins. It is a long summer, Miss Bray, and a small house, and the road brings all manner of persons to a door. His glance touched Mr. Hale once more, lightly, the way a man marks a place on a map to return to. One never knows who one is lodging. I shall give Sir Roland your respects. The gig turned in the yard, too tight, scoring the gravel, and went back down the lane between the holly and the hot grass, and the dust of it hung gold and slow in the still air, long after the creak of it had gone. Delia let out a breath she felt she had been holding since June. You said, she managed, that you were nobody in particular. I am. Nobody in particular reads a debt clause like a parson reads a banns. She turned on him in the bright morning, and the fear that had been Pell's gift to her came out the only door it had, which was anger. Who are you, Mr. Hale? You walk in wanting the smallest room a body can have. You set down silver like it's chaff. You write letters in the night you don't want read and stop the pen when the stair sings. And now you stand in my yard and turn that quill-faced devil round in a half a minute with a date and a fold of paper. Men like Pell don't hand their papers to labourers. They handed it to you because something in you told them to, and you let it. So who are you, that's so used to being minded that you've forgotten how a small room's meant to feel? He had gone still again, that whole body stillness, the stillness of the doorway, the stillness of a man who has spent his life being looked at and has just remembered it. Miss Bray, he said quietly, I think it would be better for you if you did not ask me that. I'll be the judge of what's better for me. I've been judging it alone 2 years, and I've made a passable job. A long moment. The swallows. The half-told thunder gone east, the amber morning lying over the propped tree he had mended with his own 2 hands. Then I will ask you something instead, he said, and you may answer or not. The room you gave me. He looked toward the corner of the house, toward the small window above the kitchen, where the master's room held its lavender and its 40 years. The cheapest in the house, you told me. It is plainly the dearest thing you own. You gave it to a stranger who asked you for the least you had. His grey, careful eyes came back to her. Why? She opened her mouth to fence with him, and found she had no fence left. Pell had taken it. Because somebody ought to be in it, she said, before she could stop the truth. Because I couldn't bear it standing empty another summer, and I couldn't bear to be the one who slept there. And you came in wanting to be no trouble to anyone, and that room was built for a man who was never any trouble to anyone in his life, and I thought, her voice did a thing she despised, and she mastered it. I thought it might do you good. The pair of you. Near enough. The Duke of Renmore, though she would not know to call him that for 2 days yet, stood in a country orchard, with the dust of his own world settling on his borrowed boots, and looked at the keeper of the Sparrow and Bell, as though she had said something in a language he had been told all his life did not exist. I had meant, he said, to leave tomorrow. Her heart did something complicated and unwelcome. And now? He glanced once down the empty lane where the gig had gone, toward the world that priced him, the world that would send another quill-faced man, and worse than quill-faced men, the moment it learned where he had gone to ground. Then he looked back at the small, bright window above the kitchen. Now, said Mr. Hale, I find I have not decided. Is that still permitted? And Delia Bray, who needed a great sum of money by Michaelmas, and could not afford a single secret more under her roof, heard herself say, at 6pence a night, sir, you may stay undecided as long as the summer lasts, and knew, even as the words left her, that she had just let something into the house she would not get out again so easily as a debt. Behind her, in the kitchen, the bread she had not started sat unrisen in its crock, and on the dresser the washed plate gleamed, and upstairs in the dearest room she owned a letter lay folded under a candlestick, sealed, addressed, and never sent, to a name she would have known at once, had she only been let to read it. The bread had gone well past its best hour, and she beat it down in the crock harder than the dough deserved, then set it by the warm flank of the range to think better of itself. All the while her hands worked, Her mind ran the furrow Pell's wheels had cut across the gravel. 3 weeks become a quarter. The quarter become a reprieve. The reprieve become nothing at all, unless she could conjure a sum she had no way under heaven of conjuring. The kitchen smelled of yeast and yesterday's ash, and the green bruise of the orchard still on her skirts. Flour clung to her wrists like a second, paler skin. Mr. Hale found her there. "You will want money for the autumn," he said. No preamble. He had washed and put on a clean shirt and combed the sleep out of his hair. And yet the orchard had not entirely left him. There was a smear of grey lichen at his cuff he had not troubled to notice. "I have some. I would consider it well spent." Delia did not turn from the crock. "Would you? It need not be charity. Call it lodging paid forward. A year of it. 5 years, if the figure offends you less spread thin." His voice was level, careful, the voice of a man laying a heavy thing down on a soft surface so it would not crack. "You would be doing me the service, Miss Bray. I have lately had a great deal of money do me no good whatsoever. I should like to watch some of it do good to something." She pressed her thumbs into the dough one last time, and at last she turned, and the look she gave him was the one her father had used on a man who tried to sell him a windgalled horse. "No," she said. "You have not heard the sum. I don't need to hear the sum to know I won't take it." She wiped her hands down her apron, slow, so he would understand she was not flustered, only finished. "You've been in my house one night and a morning, Mr. Hale. You don't buy a person's freehold across the breakfast things like you're settling a wager. A man who'd do that has either no notion at all what money's worth, or far too clear a notion, and either way I'd be a fool to let him hold the deed to my walls. I am offering to keep you out of Sir Rowland's hands, and put myself into yours instead." She heard her own sharpness, and did not soften it. "I'd rather owe a devil I can see than a stranger I've given my father's room to. At least with Pell I know which way he means to bite." That stopped him, not with offense, but with something closer to recognition, as though she had named a thing he had spent a long while learning the hard way, and had not expected to hear from a woman with flour to her elbows. He inclined his head, the smallest motion, and let the offer go. "Then I will not name the sum," he said, "but I will ask you one thing, and ask it in earnest. While I am under your roof, send nothing for me to the carrier. No letter, no word, no message left at the cross, at Wick Abbas. If a man comes asking whether a gentleman lodges here, the truthful answer is that you keep an inn, and inns are full of gentlemen, and you do not keep a register of their faces." Delia folded her arms. "And if I'd a mind to know why a guest of mine wants the world told he isn't here? Then you would have a mind I should be sorry to disappoint," he said, "and I would disappoint it anyway. For your sake more than mine." He paused at the door. The morning light came past him, and lay gold across the swept boards. "You said you would rather owe a devil you can see. I am asking you to let me be the one debt in this house that stays out of sight. It is the only kindness I have to offer that you might actually take." He left her there with the dough rising slow in the crock, and Delia stood a long moment with the question hot in her mouth and nowhere to put it. By noon the heat had come down hard over the valley, the kind of close, breathless summer heat that pressed the swallows low and silenced the wood pigeons and laid a shimmer over the hayfield where the glebe men moved like figures seen through water. Delia carried the slops to the pig and the scraps to the hens, and found Mrs. Pruitt in the cool of the dairy, skimming the morning's milk with a hand that had not slowed in 40 years. He offered to clear it, Delia said. The whole debt. Across the bread crock, as if he were asking for more salt. Mrs. Pruitt's wooden skimmer did not pause. "And you said no." "I said no." "Course you did." The old woman lifted a yellow ribbon of cream and let it fall back. "You'd refuse a rope if you were going down for the 3rd time, on the grounds you never asked the man to throw it." She set the skimmer down and looked at Delia over the wide shallow pans, and the dairy smelled of stone and milk and the cold green damp that lived in that one room all summer long. "I'll not scold you for it. Your father was the same, proud as a churchwarden and twice as poor for it. But I'll say this, my girl. A man doesn't offer to buy off your ruin before he's known you a full day, unless he's the wickedest kind of fool, or the most dangerous kind of honest. And I've watched that one carry his own plate down the stair and wash it without being asked. She picked the skimmer up again. Wicked fools don't wash plates. Honest men don't beg the keeper to swear they aren't under her roof, Delia said. That gave Mrs. Pruitt pause at last. She set the cream aside. He said that? He said send nothing for him. Tell anyone who asks that I keep no count of faces. Delia leaned against the cold doorframe. Prue, who hides like that? Not a man bolting a wedding. A man bolting a wedding wants to be found eventually, by the right person, when the temper's cooled. This one wants the road to forget his name was ever on it. The carrier's horns sounded then, thin and flat across the heat. Old Tranter come up the Bath Road with his slow wagon and his slower opinions, bringing the week's nails and twine and the parish's small gossip. Delia went out to him because she always went out to him, and because the habit of hope was the last thing the year had left her, that one day the wagon would carry a letter with money in it instead of out. It did not. It carried a paper, though. Tranter handed it down with 2 fingers. The way a man hands down something he has already decided is none of his affair, and the warm wind off the hayfield tried to take it from her hand. They're up at every crossroad from Chippenham to Marlborough, Tranter said, chewing nothing. Some great house lost a man, and wants him back bad enough to paper the county. Reward to make your eyes water. He clicked to his horse. Mind, half the county'll go looking now, and the other half will go looking at each other. She did not read it then. She tucked it in her apron against the press of the afternoon's work, and forgot it in the way one forgets a stone in a shoe, entirely, until each step. It was the well that did for her composure in the end, not the paper. The chain had gone again. The swivel her father had meant to mend the winter he took ill, and never mended, and the bucket dropped its bottom half into the dark, and hung there, dripping, 20 foot down, while Delia hauled and swore in the only words she allowed herself, which were her father's. She was still hauling, when Mr. Hale's shadow fell across the wellhead. Stand off it, he said. You'll lose the whole chain and your temper with it. I've already lost my temper. The chain's the last of my property I mean to keep. He did not laugh. He took off his coat, folded it once over the wall with a tidiness that was beginning to madden her, and leaned in over the dark mouth of the well, and the cold breath of it came up around them both, wet stone, deep water, the mineral green smell of a place the sun had never once touched. His sleeves were already rolled. He worked the seized swivel with his thumbs, patient as a man picking a knot from wet rope, and the muscle stood along his forearm with the strain of it. You did this for a living once, she said, watching, before whatever it is you do now. I have never done anything for a living in my life. He freed the swivel. The chain ran sweet. That is rather the trouble with me. You're a poor liar, Delia said, for a man who's had so much practice. You told me 4 times you were nobody, and not one of them held. On the contrary, he drew the bucket up hand over hand, easy, and set it streaming on the wall. I am an excellent liar. You are merely an unusually poor audience. I have built a very good lie, Miss Bray. I have spent a fortnight on it, and you have spent 2 days kicking holes in it with your boots. The fault is in the listener, not the tale. It was so dry, and so unexpected, and so entirely the first thing he had said that sounded like a man and not a closed door, that Delia laughed before she had decided to, a startled, undignified bark of it, and caught the answering flicker at the corner of his mouth, the ghost smile she had seen in the doorway, taking shape at last and meaning it. There, she said. I knew there was a person in there somewhere. Mrs. Pruitt owes me an egg. You wagered on whether I was human? On whether you could be made to admit it? She took the dripping bucket from him. Their hands were close on the cold iron, and for a moment neither moved them, and the well breathed up its dark green breath between them, and somewhere over the hayfield a yellow hammer asked its one endless question of the heat. Then, she stepped back. Brisk, because brisk was the only armor she had ever needed, and she was not about to mislay it now. You'll want your dinner. You've earned it twice over, and I'll not have it said I starved a man who mended my chain." He retrieved his coat. As he shrugged into it, the folded paper fell from her apron pocket, Tranter's handbill, and skated across the gravel, and Mr. Hale bent and picked it up before she could, in the same unthinking courtesy with which he washed his plate and propped her trees. She watched his face as he glanced at it. She would think, after, that she had never seen a man go so still so fast, that the stillness she had taken for a habit was nothing to this, that this was the stillness of an animal that has heard the dog and not yet decided whether running will only teach the dog where it stands. It lasted half a breath. Then he folded the paper along its crease, neat, and held it out to her, and his face had closed again like water over a stone. "Yours, I think," he said. "Mine. Some great house has mislaid a man and wants him back." So it would seem. He did not meet her eye. The county is full of mislaid men this summer. And he went into his dinner, and Delia stood, turning the unread paper in her fingers, and did not read it, because reading it felt suddenly like opening a door she had been warned twice in one day to leave shut, and she had never in her life been good at leaving doors shut. And she was afraid, for the first time clearly afraid, of what wanting to know might cost her. She had not finished turning it over when she heard the second carriage of the day come up the lane. This was no gig. This was a chaise, dark and well sprung, 2 good bays in the traces, and a coachman who knew his business, and it came round the holly at the bend without hurry. The way a thing comes that has never once in its existence had to hurry. It drew up in the yard precisely where Pell's gig had stood that morning, as though the ground there had been bespoke, and the man who stepped down from it was the handsomest Delia had ever seen, and she disliked him before his boot touched her gravel. Sir Roland was perhaps 30, fair-haired, with the kind of face that portrait painters lengthen their waiting lists for, a clean jaw, a fine straight nose, eyes the cool grey blue of a January sky, and just as warm. He wore dove-coloured riding clothes that had never seen a road's dust, and he stood a moment looking at the Sparrow and Bell, at its low crooked roof, and its bright pewter glinting through the casement, and its propped and heavy fruiting trees, with the frank, unhurried pleasure of a man surveying a thing he has already, in his own mind, knocked down. "Miss Bray." He did not need to ask. "I am Sir Roland. I believe you have had the pleasure of my Mr. Pell." "I've had Mr. Pell," Delia said. "I'd not call it a pleasure, and I'd not call it news that brought you, for Pell brings all your news for you. So you've come for the house yourself. You'll forgive me if I don't curtsy to a man come to measure my orchard for a road." Something flickered in the cool eyes. Amusement, she thought. The lazy amusement of a cat that finds the mouse has opinions. He drew off one glove, finger by finger, exactly as Pell had done, and she understood in a cold flash that the clerk had learned the trick from the master. "You misjudge me," Sir Roland said pleasantly. "I have not come to measure anything. I have come to be generous, which I find people enjoy a great deal less than they ought." He walked a slow turn of the yard, trailing the glove against his thigh, taking in the well and the dairy door and the kitchen window with its rising bread. "Your father borrowed against this freehold when the coaching trade was fat and the road ran here. The road runs to Devizes now. Miss Bray, your trade is a third what it was and falling. You cannot find my money at Michaelmas any more than you could find it at Lammas. We both know this. I am not a cruel man, whatever your Mrs. Pruitt says of me over her pans, and I have no wish to put a respectable young woman onto the parish." "How kind." "I think so." He stopped and turned the full cool weight of that beautiful face upon her. "Sell to me now." "Of your own will, at a fair figure. More than fair. A figure that clears the debt and leaves you something over to set up a snug shop in Bath, where a handsome, capable woman might do very well for herself among people who matter. Sign it over, and walk away with money in your hand and your pride intact, and let me have my orchard and my road, or hold out 3 months on stubbornness and a prayer, lose it all at Michaelmas for nothing, and walk away with neither the land nor the price of it. You are a woman of sense. There is only one sum in it that adds. It was, Delia would admit later, very nearly the cruelest thing anyone had ever done to her. Because it was reasonable, and it was kind in the shape of its words, and every figure of it was true. My father set that orchard, she said. Her voice did not shake, and she thanked God for it. He set it the year I was born, a tree for every year he meant me to have, and he tended it through every winter he had breath for, and he lies in Wick Abbas churchyard, within sound of the bees that work it. You want to run a coach road through my father, over a debt of bad luck and a move date. There's no sum that adds to that, Sir Roland. Not yours. Not the king's. Take your generous figure back to your fine chaise, and tell it to wait till Michaelmas like every other creditor my father ever owed. For that's the day the law gives me, and I mean to use the whole of it. For a long moment the yard held nothing but the heat, and the drone of the orchard bees, and the small chink of the bays mouthing their bits. Sir Roland looked at her, and the amusement had gone out of his face, and what was left was colder, and more honest, and a great deal worse. You will lose, he said quietly, and when you lose, the figure will not be there to lose with you. I shall buy it for the debt and a shilling, and you shall have the parish, and you will have chosen it. He drew his glove back on. Stubbornness is the only luxury the poor permit themselves. It is also the only one they cannot afford. He had half turned to the chaise when he stopped. He had seen the coat. Mr. Hale's coat, good cloth, town cut, hung carelessly on the wellhead to dry where he had folded it, the green stain at its cuff. Sir Roland looked at it the way a hound looks at a scent that does not belong in a field, and then his cool gaze came up and went, slowly, deliberately, to the small bright window above the kitchen, the master's window, where the curtain hung exactly as still as a curtain hangs when someone has just that moment stepped back from it. You keep a guest, Sir Roland said. It was not a question. I keep an inn, said Delia, and heard her own words come back at her in another man's voice, and felt the cold of it. It's full of gentlemen. I keep no count of their faces. No, he agreed softly, his eyes still on the window. I don't suppose you do. He smiled then, and it was the worst thing he had done yet, because it was a smile of genuine pleasure, the smile of a man whose sum has just, unexpectedly, found a new and interesting figure to add. Good day, Miss Bray. We shall speak again before Michaelmas. I find I have grown almost eager for it. The chaise turned, neat where Pels had scored the gravel, and went down the lane between the holly and the burning grass, and Delia stood until the dust of it had hung and settled, and the bees had filled the silence back up to the brim. Then she went in. Mr. Hale was on the stair. She heard the third step sing under him as he came down. Too quick, not careful for once, and his face when it found hers in the dim of the passage was not closed any more. It was urgent. What did he see? He said. Your coat. And the window, where you were fool enough to stand. She put her back to the doorframe because her knees, traitors, had begun a small private shaking. He's nobody to be afraid of, Mist. Hale. He's only the man who holds my ruin, unless you'd like to tell me he's something to you. Unless you'd like to tell me, at last, what it is I've let under my roof, before that beautiful devil puts it together quicker than I can. And she pulled Tranter's handbill from her apron at last, because the not knowing had become the more dangerous thing, and she smoothed it open against the wall in the passage light to read it aloud and have it done. The great house that had mislaid a man, the reward to make the eyes water, and her own voice stopped in her throat at the first line of it, where the printer's heavy type named the house that grieved, and the title of the man it sought. Renmore. Behind her, very quietly, in the voice she had heard only an hour ago be dry and human at the wellhead, Mr. Hale said, Delia, don't. But her eye had already gone, the way an eye will, down past the name to the description beneath, dark hair, 26, a great sum of reward, and no questions asked. And her thumb was moving across the printed words, the way a person's thumb moves over a thing it cannot yet believe it is holding. And from the kitchen the smell of the bread she had set that morning came up at last, risen, and ready, and entirely too late. And on the page under her hand the summer afternoon turned itself slowly, irreversibly, into something she would never be able to give back. Renmore. The word sat on the page in the printer's heavy black, and beneath it the rest came up to meet her eye, whether she would or no. His Grace the Duke of Renmore, lately absent from his estates, dark of hair, 26 years, of gentleman's bearing, any person bringing certain word of him to Mr. Halloran at the Crown, Marlborough, to receive £200, and no questions put. £200. The figure swam and steadied. £200 was Sir Rowland cleared twice over, and the orchard saved, and her father's trees standing whole in the churchyard's hearing, till she herself was old. £200 stood in the passage between her and the man who had mended her well an hour since, and the man's face had gone the grey of cold ash. "Don't," he said again, very low. "Whatever you have just read on it, set it down, and don't. It names a duke." Her voice came out of her from a long way off. "It names a duke, and it draws him to the life. Dark hair, 26. A gentleman's bearing in a labourer's coat, drying on my wellhead." She lifted her eyes from the page to him, and the passage was dim and close and smelled of the risen bread, and the day's heat trapped in the lime-wash, and she found she had to hold the wall. "You told me you were nobody, Mr. Hale, 4 times. 5. And all the while there's £200, and the King's own county papered with your face. Not my face." His mouth twisted. "They have no likeness of me worth the woodcut. Only the description. Only this." He gestured at himself. The rolled sleeves, the green stain, the borrowed plainness, with a kind of contempt she did not think was meant for her. "Which you could read off me in the dark." "Are you?" she said. Renmore. For a moment she thought he would lie to her one last time, and she found she could not have borne it. She would rather he struck her than told her one more thing that did not hold. But the lie did not come. Something went out of him instead, some long-held breath, some hand that had been gripping a rope above a drop, and now, simply, let go. "I am," he said. "God help us both. Yes, I am the Duke of Renmore, and I have been calling myself Hale for a fortnight, and I gave you silver and a false name, and slept in your father's bed, and you have a paper in your hand worth more than everything that quill-faced devil means to take from you." He looked at her steadily, and it cost him. She could see it cost him. "So now you know the size of the thing you have let under your roof, Delia Bray. It is rather larger than a wedding bolted, is it not?" The bees droned in the orchard. From the kitchen the bread breathed out its warm gold. She stood with £200 in her 2 hands, and could not make her fingers close on it or let it fall. "Why," she said. "A duke doesn't run. A duke owns the road and the men on it. A duke sends Pell, he doesn't hide from him." She heard her own bewilderment turn, the way her fear always turned, into the nearest hard thing. "What did you do? That all your money and all your name couldn't mend it, and you had to come crawl into the smallest room a poor woman keeps and ask her to swear you off her doorstep?" "I did nothing," he said. "That is the whole of it. I have spent 26 years doing precisely, exactly, faultlessly nothing that was asked of me, and being thanked for it, and never once being let to do a single thing I chose." He pushed a hand through his dark hair, and the gesture had nothing ducal in it. It was a tired man's. "And then a morning came when they laid the last of it in front of me to sign, and I found I would sooner prop apple boughs for 6 under another man's name than put my hand to one more thing that was decided for me before I was breeched. So I walked out of a house with more rooms than yours has spoons. Your Mrs. Pruitt had the right of it. I heard her through the boards, and I kept walking until a woman gave me the dearest room she owned for the price of the cheapest, and would not be argued out of it. She made him sit. She did not entirely know why, except that her own legs had gone, and it seemed monstrous to fall down in front of a duke when she could make him sit instead. She put him at the scrubbed kitchen table where she put everyone, with the bread cooling on the rack, and the moths not yet woken, and the long bar of afternoon light falling gold across the boards he had washed his plate above. The ordinariness of it steadied her more than any brandy could have done. "The letter," she said. She set the handbill face down on the table between them, because she could not bear it face up. "You wrote a letter the first night." The pen stopped when the stair sang. It sat under the candlestick 3 days, sealed, and never gone to the carrier. "I've not read it. I'd not read a guest's letter to save my soul, but I've carried your supper past it, and I've felt it lying there like a coal." She folded her flower-pale hands on the table to stop them shaking. "Who's it to, Your Grace? What's the name on it, I'd know." He was quiet a long moment. Outside, a wood pigeon found its voice again in the cooling afternoon and asked its soft 5 notes of the heat. "You would know it," he agreed. "Even here. They put her in the papers when she came out. The beauty of her season, the Marquis's daughter, the match the whole of London laid wagers on." His thumb moved on the table's grain, back and forth, the way her own thumb had moved on the printed words. "Lady Sophia Vane. We have been promised to one another since she was in leading strings, and I was at school. Our fathers shook on it over claret before either of us could spell. Her family's name mends my estate's credit, my title mends her family's blood. It is a very good arrangement. Everyone says so. She says so." A breath. "The letter under your candlestick tells her I will not have it. That I am sorry. That I am more sorry than I can write, but that I will not stand at the rail at St. George's in September and swear before God to a thing 2 men decided over wine in the year of my birth." "Then send it," Delia said. "Send it, and be free, and go home, and own your road again. Why's it sat there sealed 3 days? Because sending it shames her before the whole world." He said it simply, and she heard, under the simplicity, the thing that had stopped his pen. "If I cry off, the fault is hers in every drawing-room in England, the Duke who would not have her, the beauty no one wanted after all. Her sisters unmarried behind her. Her father's name a joke at the clubs. She has done nothing, Miss Bray, but be handed to me the way you were handed Pell's paper, and if I post that letter, I ruin a blameless woman to buy my own liberty." He looked up, and the grey eyes were not closed now. They were wide open, and they were terrible. "So I carry it sealed, and I cannot send it, and I cannot tear it up. And I came to ground in your father's room because it was the one place in the world where no one had yet decided anything about me at all. And now there is £200 on your table that says I have nowhere left to put it down." Mrs. Pruitt came in upon the tail of it, as Mrs. Pruitt came in upon everything, with a bowl of skimmed cream on her hip and her opinions out front, where they could be seen coming. She took in the 2 of them at the table, and the handbill lying face down like a thing ashamed of itself, and the look on Delia's face, and she set the bowl down with the great soft care of a woman who has understood a room before a word of it is spoken. "Well," she said, "so the great house has found its way to my kitchen at last." She did not curtsy. She wiped her hands on her apron and fixed the Duke of Wrenmore with the flat copper pan stare she kept for fishmongers and tacksmen. "I'll not call you Your Grace over the bread, sir, for I've not the knees for it and you've not the manners to require it, having washed your own plate 3 mornings running. But I'll say I knew you for quality the first night, and I'll say a man who hides this hard is either ashamed of what he's done or ashamed of what they'd make him do. And I'll wager the eggs it's the second. For the first sort never lifts a finger, and you've mended that well like a man glad of the excuse." "It is the second," he said gravely. "Mrs. Pruitt, I have done you the discourtesy of eating your pie under a false name. I am sorry for it. You're sorry for a deal of things, by the look of you. And the pie's not the half of them." She turned to Delia, and the flat stare softened, and that was worse. That was always worse. "She's read the bill, then. The sums on it." £200, Delia said. Her own voice frightened her. It was so level. "To Mr. Halloran at the Crown in Marlborough." No questions put. The kitchen went very still. The bar of light had crept a hand's breadth along the boards. Somewhere out in the burning afternoon Tranter's wagon ground away down the Bath Road, taking its small gossip on to the next door, and the bees worked the orchard, and the bread sat finished and cooling, and 3 people stood inside a sum that could buy back everything one of them had lost. It was Mrs. Pruitt who said it, because Mrs. Pruitt said the things no one else would carry. "It's your house, girl." Her voice was gentle and pitiless at once. "It's your father's orchard and your father's trees, and your father's name in the churchyard, and that sum on the table clears the lot of it and leaves you whole. And the man it'd take it from walked in 3 days ago, a stranger, and gave you a false name to your face." She picked the cream bowl up again, as though her hands needed the work. "I'll not tell you which way to fall. I'll only say no soul in this parish would blame you for the falling, and the law that gave him his £200 of price is the same law that'll give Sir Rowland your walls at Michaelmas. You didn't make the bargain. You'd only be taking the side of it that keeps a roof over my old head and yours." She moved to the door. "I'll be in the dairy. Whatever you settle it before the light goes, for there's milk to set, and neither of you's any use to me grieving over it in the dark." She went. The latch fell behind her with a small wooden finality. The Duke of Renmore looked at the face-down handbill, and then he did a thing that undid Delia entirely. He reached out and turned it face up himself, so that his own description lay there between them in the printer's black, the £200 plain and bold, and he pushed it the last inch across the boards until it sat under her hand. "Take it," he said quietly. "She is right, and I am the proof of it. Send word to Marlborough. Halloran will come with the money, and a closed carriage, and men enough. And they will take me back to Renmore and St. George's, and Lady Sophia, and the whole machine of my life. And you will have your orchard, and your father's trees will stand. It is the only thing my name was ever good for, Delia. Let it be good for this." His mouth did the bitter twist again. "I told you I should like to watch my money do some good to something. Let it buy back your apple trees. There is a justice in it I find I can almost bear." She looked at the paper under her hand for a long time. The light moved. The bread cooled. Out in the orchard the propped bow hung heavy with its hardening green fruit, the crutch he had eased beneath it, as gentle as a man settling a sleeper's head, and through the window the small bright master's room kept its secret folded under its candlestick. "No," she said. "Delia, you'll not do that." She lifted her hand off the handbill and pushed it back across the table at him, harder than she meant, so that it skated and nearly went off the edge, and he caught it. "You'll not sit at my father's table and make me the hand that sends you back to a thing you'd sooner prop bows than face. You think I can't read what that matches to you? I read your debt clause off Pell's gloves and your lie off your boots, your grace. I can read a man who'd rather be small and unseen forever than stand at a rail and swear to a lie before God." Her voice cracked, and she let it, for once. "I gave you that room because somebody ought to be in it, and because you came in wanting the least a man can have. I'll not now sell you for the most a man can fetch. I'd not be able to draw water from that well again without seeing your hands on the chain. Then you will lose the house," he said. "For me. For a stranger. That is not sense, Delia. That is your father's pride in your father's daughter. And it will put you on the parish." Likely, she scrubbed the heel of her hand across her eyes, brisk, furious at herself. "I've been told twice today by handsome men that I haven't the sense to take the figure that adds. Sir Rowland said the same. Stubbornness is the only luxury the poor can't afford. And he's right, and you're right, and I don't care, because there's a sum, your beautiful devil, and your £200 neither of you can do. And it's this: I can't make my father's trees worth the price of a man. I'd have the orchard, and I'd have sold the only honest thing that's walked through my door in 2 years to keep it, and the trees would stand, and I'd be hollow as a struck drum every day I lived under them. So no. Keep your name. Keep your liberty long, as the summer lasts. We'll find Sir Rowland's money some other road, or we'll lose by Michaelmas like honest fools, but we'll not find it down that one." He sat looking at her as though she were, again, speaking the language he had been told all his life did not exist. And then, slowly, wonderingly, The Duke of Renmore put his face down into his two scarred working hands, there at her kitchen table, and his broad shoulders moved once. Hard, and Delia turned away to the bread and gave him the only mercy she had, which was to pretend with all her might that she had not seen it. It was the gig that broke the afternoon open, the black lacquered town gig. Come back up the lane a second time the same day, and Delia's stomach folded over its bad tooth clench at the first creak of it past the holly. For no good ever came up that lane twice in a day. She went out into the slanting gold with her chin up and her hands still floured, and Mr. Pell drew rein where he had drawn it that morning, and this time he was not alone. Sir Roland sat beside him. The baronet had changed from his dove grey into something darker and easier, the dress of a man settling in for a pleasant evening's work, and he did not get down, and he did not draw off a glove. He simply sat in the gig in the cooling light, with his beautiful cold face turned to the small bright window above the kitchen, and he smiled at it. And then he smiled at her. "Miss Bray," he said, "forgive the second call. I am not, as a rule, an impatient man, but I find the day has brought me an education, and I could not rest on it." He let the silence stretch, drawing it out the way Pell drew on gloves, so that she might feel its size. "On my way from your door this morning I passed the cross at Wick Abbas, where some great house has papered the post with its grief. A duke gone to ground. Dark of hair. 26. A gentleman's bearing. His grey-blue eyes came back from the window to her face, and they were warm now, warm with pleasure, which was the worst they had yet been. And I thought of a good town coat drying on a poor woman's well-head, with a green stain at the cuff, and a curtain that twitched at my voice. And I thought, Miss Bray, what an interesting summer this has become." Delia kept her hands at her sides, and her voice in its place. "You're fond of thinking, Sir Roland. It's brought you no money yet. It is about to bring me a great deal." He folded his hands on the rail of the gig, content as a churchwarden. "Here is the shape of my education, and you will tell me if I have the sum wrong. You are harbouring a man worth £200 to whoever speaks his whereabouts. You owe me a debt you cannot pay, that falls at Michaelmas, that will take your house. Now," he smiled, "I could ride to Marlborough tonight and have the 200 for myself, and your duke in a closed carriage by morning, and your house at Michaelmas into the bargain, and that would be a fine day's adding, and I should still have my coach rode through your orchard. But I am a generous man, Miss Bray. I told you so. I would so much rather we were friends." "Say it plain," she said. "I've bread to take in." Plainly, then, he leaned a little from the gig, and his voice dropped to the pleasant, reasonable register that had nearly broken her that morning. "Persuade him. You seem to have a gift with stray gentlemen. You gave this one your father's own room, I'm told, which is more than you've given me, and I hold your paper." The smile thinned. "His family want him home, and married. I want my road, and my money. These wants are not at odds. Persuade your duke to go quietly back to Renmore and Lady Sophia Vane. For I know the whole of it now. Pell has been busy. Persuade him to go and be the thing he was made to be, and I will tear your father's claws to pieces with my own hands, and call the debt a wedding gift. You keep the house. You keep the orchard. I keep my good name as the man who restored a lost duke to his grieving people, which is worth a deal more to me than your 12 sour acres. Everyone is whole. Everyone is happy. All it asks of you, Miss Bray, is that you do what is best for him, which any sensible woman can see is to go home, and let me be the one to take him there." From the corner of her eye, Delia saw the kitchen doorway darken. She did not turn. She did not have to. She felt the Duke of Renmore come to stand in his own borrowed plainness on the threshold of the house that had hidden him, and she felt the precise moment Sir Roland saw him too, for the baronet's beautiful face lit like a window at dusk. "Ah," Sir Roland said softly. "Your Grace. I had hoped." "Sir Roland." The Duke's voice had changed, She heard it go cool and high and far away, the voice of the doorway. The voice of a man remembering at last that he had been born to be obeyed and despising the knowledge. You will leave this woman's debt where her father's hand set it. Michaelmas, quarter by quarter, as the clause reads. You will not make her the lever you pry me out with. Whatever I am worth to Marlborough, you may have it of me direct and welcome, and the road too, every yard of it surveyed. But you will not buy her orchard with my name, and you will not stand in her yard and call ruin a wedding gift. But that is exactly what I shall do, Sir Roland said, delighted, gathering his reins, unless one of you stops me, and you cannot, your grace, for the instant you raise your voice above this hedgerow you are found, and the instant you are found you are married, and the lady keeps her acres only so long as you keep your silence in her smallest room. Do you see? I have you both by the one thread. Pull it either way and someone is unmade. The gig began to turn. Neat. Scoring nothing. I'll give you till Sunday. 3 days. Persuade him, Miss Bray, or read me your answer at Wick Abbas after the banns, for I mean to be at that church door, whatever you decide. And I shall have a man on the Marlborough Road from tonight who knows a duke when one runs past him. He touched his hat to her, courtesy itself. Good evening. The summer suits the house. I should hate to see it pulled down. And the black gig went away down the lane, between the holly and the burning grass, and the dust of it hung and would not settle. And Delia Bray stood in the last of the gold, with flowered hands and £200 worth of secret breathing at her back, and understood that whichever way she fell now, she fell through her father's trees, and that the man behind her in the doorway had, by Sunday, 3 days to be either betrayed by the woman who would not sell him, or saved by the ruin of everything she had left. He'll not be your ruin, Delia. The Duke said it that night in the kitchen, low, with the rushlight guttering between them and the day's heat still breathing out of the walls. He had carried in the wood, without being asked, and now he stood with his back to the cold hearth and his arms folded, watching her bank the fire for morning, and the orchard sent its warm green dark in through the open casement, full of moths and the last drowsy complaint of a wood-pigeon. You've a deal of opinions about my ruin, she said, for a man who brought it up the lane on his own boots. That is rather my point. He unfolded one arm and rubbed the back of his neck, a tired man's gesture, nothing ducal in it. Sir Roland has no quarrel with you. He never had. You are the wall he means to climb to reach me. Pull me out of the wall, and you are only a woman with a debt again, a hard thing, but an honest one, and one you were managing before I darkened your door. I was managing it the way a body manages a leak with a thumb. Delia pressed the last sod of turf over the embers and straightened, wiping her hands. Badly, and only till the next thumbs wanted. She turned, and found him closer than she had thought, the rushlight laying a soft amber edge along his jaw, his dark eyes steady on her, in a way that made the careful machinery of her own breath forget its work. Why do you keep trying to make yourself the smallest part of every room you're in, Your Grace? You did it the first night. You're doing it now, because for 26 years I have been the largest part of every room, whether I would or no. His voice had gone quiet and rough at the edge, and I came here, and a woman put me in a corner over her own bread oven and gave me a singing stair and a tree to mend, and for 2 days I was a man who was no trouble to anyone. He looked at her, and the ghost's smile came and went, aching this time. I had forgotten that was a thing a person could be. I do not want to forget it again. For a moment the whole warm dark of the kitchen held still around them, and Delia's hand lifted half an inch from her apron toward his sleeve, toward the green lichen stain he had never troubled to brush away, and she caught it back, because brisk was the only armor she had ever owned, and she had a cold premonition she would need every scrap of it by Sunday. Go up to bed, she said. Mind the third step. I shall, he said. Good night, Delia, he went, and the step sang under him, and she stood listening to it sing, and did not know, could not have known, that it was the last time that summer she would hear him climb a stair that did not cost her anything. She woke to wrongness before she woke to light. It was the quality of the quiet that did it. The house too still, The master's room above the kitchen sending down none of the small sounds a sleeping man sends. No creak, no breath of movement in the boards. Delia lay a moment in the grey, before dawn, with her heart already counting, and then she was up and on the stair in her shift, with a shawl snatched anyhow. And the third step sang under her own foot like an accusation, and she pushed the door of her father's room open onto emptiness. The bed was made. Made the way a soldier makes a bed, square and cold, the coverlet drawn so smooth it might never have held a man at all. His bag was gone from the press. His coat was gone from the chair, and under the brass candlestick where it had lain 3 days sealed and unsent, the letter to Lady Sophia Vane, the letter he could not send and could not tear, was gone too. Delia stood in the doorway, with the dawn coming grey through the orchard window, and the lavender smell of the empty room rising cool around her, and she understood it the way you understand cold water closing over your head. He had gone back to them. He had taken the dearest room she owned, and her father's square cornered bed, and her 2 foolish days of trust, and he had folded them all up neat as that coverlet, and carried them off in the dark to St. George's and the Marquis's daughter, and the whole great machine of the life he had been bred to. He had decided she should not be ruined for him, and the deciding had been his. Again, the way everything in his life was decided by men in rooms, while women slept, and he had not even woken her to let her have a word in it. He had given himself back. He had chosen the rail and the lie before God over the woman who would not sell him, because the woman who would not sell him was only a 6-penny lodging after all, and a duke does not stay in the smallest room forever. The bees had not yet woken in the orchard. The hayfield lay grey and breathless. Somewhere below, Mrs. Pruitt's clogs struck the dairy flag, the day starting whether Delia would have it or no. She did not weep. She went down the singing stair 1 cold step at a time, and into the kitchen, and stood looking at the dresser where his washed plate had gleamed 3 mornings running, and she put both hands flat on the scrubbed deal table to keep herself upright. And that was how Mrs. Pruitt found her. Gone, the old woman said. It was not a question. She set down her bowl with the soft care she kept for breakages. In the night. With the letter. Delia's voice came out of her flat, and very far away. He's taken the letter. He's gone to be the thing they made him. She lifted her head. I wouldn't sell him, Prue. I stood at that table. And I wouldn't. And I told myself it was the honest thing. And he's gone and sold himself anyway. And now I've neither the man nor the £200, nor by Michaelmas the house, and I've been a fool in every coin a woman has to spend. Mrs. Pruitt came and put one flowery, knotted hand over Delia's where it pressed the wood, and said nothing at all. Which was how Delia knew how bad it was. The reckoning came at noon, and it came, as everything that summer came, up the lane between the holly and the burning grass, but it was not the gig, and it was not the chaise. It was old Tranter's slow wagon, and Tranter handed down a folded paper with 2 fingers and the air of a man who has read the direction and decided it is above his station to wonder at. For you, he said, left at the Crown at Marlborough by a gentleman, with a shilling to see it carried sharp. Sharp, he said. Not like Tranter to be sharp, but a shilling's a shilling. He clicked to his horse. Whole county's still mad for that lost duke. They say he's took. They say he walked into the Crown last night bold as a beetle, and gave himself up by his own name, and never a soul collected the 200 for it, which is a waste, if you ask me, of a perfectly good duke. Delia did not hear the wagon go. She had the paper open against the yard wall, and it was his hand. She knew it now. The small, dry, patient hand that had scratched at a letter through the boards her first night, and it was short. Delia, by the time Tranter brings you this, I will have done the one thing in my life no man chose for me. Do not believe what the bills will say of how it was done. I have not gone back to be the thing they made. I have gone to unmake it, openly, in my own name, where Sir Rowland's whisper can no longer reach you. Be at Wick Abbas on Sunday. Bring your father's clause. Trust me one day further than is sensible. I have learnt the trick of it from you. W. She read it 3 times. The bees worked the orchard. The propped bow hung heavy with hardening green fruit. And something in her chest that had lain cold since dawn turned slowly over and put out one frightened leaf toward the light. Prue, she called, and her voice had come back into her body. Prue, fetch me my good gown, and find me my father's box, and the clause that's in it. We're for church on Sunday, and I've a use for our pride at last. Wick Abbas on a Sunday in high summer smelled of cut grass and hot stone, and the beeswax the sexton rubbed into the old oak door. And the bees that worked the churchyard limes worked Delia's father's grave too, within sound of which he had asked to lie. She came up the like path in her one good gown of deep cornflower blue, with the claws folded in her glove, and the whole parish was there in its Sunday best, and so was the black lacquered gig, and so was Sir Rowland. He stood at the church door itself, fair and easy in dove grey again, beautiful as a painting and twice as cold, and he had a paper in his own gloved hand, and Delia did not need to be told it was a notice of banns, or a deed, or some other instrument of her undoing, dressed in Sunday clothes. Missed. Pell hovered at his shoulder with the leather case. The parson hung uneasy in the porch shadow, plainly told to wait. Miss Bray. Sir Rowland's grey-blue eyes went over her gown, and her steadiness with frank pleasure. You came. And in your colours, too. I confess I had wondered whether you would slink up the back way, or not come at all. But here you are, brave as a flag, and your duke nowhere about you. He smiled. They took him at Marlborough, you'll have heard. Walked in and gave himself up, the romantic fool, and never let a farthing of the reward fall to you for it. So you have lost your lodger and saved nothing, and I have come, as I promised, to read you your answer at the church door. He unfolded his paper. I shall be kind and quick. Sell me the freehold this morning, before these good people, at the figure I named, and you walk away whole. Refuse, and I call the whole debt at my Caelmas, and pull your orchard down for my road, and you have the parish, and the parish has the watching of it. Read what you like, Sir Rowland, Delia said, and was astonished at how level it came. I'll not sell my father's trees on a Sunday at his own church door to a man who'd run a coach road through his grave. You may say it before God and the whole of Wick Abbas if you've the stomach. I've found I don't much care what handsome men say of my sense any more. Something flickered behind the beautiful face, the old amusement, fraying now at its edge into something that wanted very much to be cruelty, and had not, yet, been given leave. Then, you have chosen the parish, he said softly. Pell, she has chosen nothing, said a voice from the light gate, and you have lost everything, and I have come to tell you the sum of it in front of witnesses, which I find people enjoy a great deal less than they ought. The Duke of Renmore came up the path through the parted Sunday crowd, and he had not come the way he left. He wore his own clothes now, a coat of midnight blue that no village bootmaker had measured, a fall of clean linen at his throat, his dark hair cut to order, and he came at the unhurried pace of a man who has never once in his life had to hurry, and the whole parish drew its breath as one creature, for they knew a duke when one walked in among them, papered, as the county was, with his very description. But it was his face Delia watched, and his face, when it found hers across the churchyard, was not the closed door of the first night, nor the cold high mask he had turned on Pell. It was open. It was frightened. It was entirely, nakedly glad to see her. And it had stopped, somewhere on the Marlborough Road, pretending otherwise. Sir Rowland, the Duke, stopped before the church door, and the parish made a ring about them without being told, the way people will when they smell the turning of a great wheel. You hold 3 threats, and you have built a very pretty engine of them, and I have spent 2 days taking it to pieces. Attend, for I shall only say it once, and there are clergy present to remember it. He held up one gloved finger, exactly, deliberately, as Sir Rowland himself had once drawn a coach road through the air. Your first thread was my name, that you might whisper my whereabouts, and have me dragged home in a closed carriage to be married off like a colt. That thread is cut, I walked into the Crown at Marlborough on Thursday night and gave my own name to my own people in my own voice, and wrote to my uncle and to the Court Journal both, so that by Tuesday all of England will know precisely where the Duke of Renmore has been, and that he went there of his own will. You cannot reveal a man who has revealed himself, Sir Rowland. There is nothing left in that hand to sell. Pell's quill-trimmed face had begun a new sum. Sir Rowland's had gone very still. Your second thread, said the Duke, raising another finger, was the marriage. That while I hid, I could be hauled to St. George's and chained to Lady Sophia Vane to mend two families' fortunes, and that Miss Bray's silence was the only thing standing between me and that rail. Cut also. He drew a folded paper from his breast, and Delia's heart lurched, for she knew the creases of it, knew the seal, knew it for the letter that had lain 3 days unsent under her father's candlestick. I sent this at last, not in secret. I rode to Lady Sophia's father myself, and laid it in her own hand, and waited while she read it. And do you know what the beauty of her season said to me, Sir Rowland? His mouth curved, and there was a true ease in it now. Hard won, she said. Thank God, Renmore, I had not the courage to be the first. She wants me no more than I want her. We have cried off together, by mutual consent, before both our families, and there is no shame in it for either. For a thing two people lay down together shames no one. The Marquis keeps his pride, her sisters keep their prospects, and I keep my liberty. Your second thread held nothing but air. A murmur ran the churchyard like wind through barley. Delia stood with the claws folded in her glove and her eyes stinging in the bright morning, and did not trust herself to make a sound. And the third, Sir Rowland said. His voice had lost its silk. It came out thin. The debt. You have not touched the debt. Whatever you have done with your name and your Marquis's chit, Miss Bray still owes me, and the clause still falls, and I shall still have her acres for my road. Ah, said the Duke. The third thread. Yes, Mr. Pell, be so good as to fetch your master's bond from that case, for I think Miss Bray would like to hold it. I will pay it, the Duke said. Now, here, every penny your master is owed, with the lawful interest to Michaelmas, in a banker's draft drawn on my own house, and honoured anywhere in England. He produced it, a single crisp sheet that Pell took, and read, and could not find the smallest flaw in, for his hands had begun very slightly to shake. Not as a gift to Miss Bray, she would not have it of me, and she was right not to. A woman should not owe her walls to any man, least of all one who walked in lying about his boots. I pay you, Sir Rowland. I settle her father's debt at its honest figure, and in return you will discharge the bond, surrender the clause, and take your survey and your coach road to some other man's orchard. The freehold is hers, free and clear, owing nothing to me but the rent of the smallest room, which I mean to go on paying at 6pence a night, for as long as she will have me under her roof. Sir Rowland looked at the draft in Pell's trembling fingers. He looked at the ring of the parish, who had heard every word, and who would carry every word to every kitchen and taproom from Chippenham to Marlborough by Monday noon, so that the man who refused a fairly paid debt at a church door on a Sunday would be the talk and the scorn of the county before the bells were cold. He was beautiful still. He would always be beautiful. But the cold had nowhere left to go. You think you have won something, he said at last, very low, for Delia alone, and it was the truest cruel thing he had in him. A duke, and a draught of money, and a wronged woman's gratitude. You will be the talk of every drawing-room you enter, Miss Bray. The innkeeper, his grace, bought a freehold to bed near. They will smile at you, and price you to your face. I do you the courtesy of telling you so now. You do me no courtesy at all, Delia said. But I thank you for the lesson in adding, Sir Rowland, for I've learnt a sum of my own off you this summer. It's this, that a man who's only ever counted what a thing fetches never once learns what it's worth, and that's why you'll go home rich tonight, and poorer than I'll ever be. Now sign my father's clause to nothing, and go, and mind the bees as you pass his grave. He kept them sweeter-tempered than your master keeps you. For a moment the whole churchyard held its breath. Then Sir Roland, with a small, exact, furious courtesy, took the bond from Pell's hands, drew the clerk's own pen, and struck his name beneath a line of discharge, and held the paper out, not across the gap, this time, but close, so that for once in that long summer a man came the last step to her. Delia took it. The paper was warm from Pell's case, and crisp at the fold, and the wax of the broken seal had left a small red crumb on her glove, and her thumb moved across the printer's heavy line, the way her thumb had moved across the handbill 3 days gone, over a thing it could not yet believe it held. The said debt being fully satisfied, the discharge read in the lawyer's round black hand, the freehold and all appurtenances thereof are released free and clear unto Delia Bray, her heirs and assigns forever. Forever. The word swam and steadied. The gig turned in the like lane, neat, scoring nothing, and bore Sir Roland and his clerk and his rolled survey away down between the limes and the hot grass, and the dust of it hung gold and slow and would not settle. And the parish, with the great native tact of people who have just seen everything, found it was suddenly very interested in filing into church, which left Delia Bray in her cornflower gown in the empty churchyard, with a discharged bond in one hand, and the keeper of her father's grave's bees droning at her back, and the Duke of Renmore standing 3 feet off with his hat in his 2 scarred hands, looking at her as though she were the only honest thing in a county full of liars. "You might have told me," she said. Her voice cracked clean across the middle, and she let it. "You might have woke me, and told me, instead of leaving the bed square and the room cold, and me to think you'd gone back to be the thing they made. I stood in that doorway at dawn, your grace, and I believed you'd folded me up neat as that coverlet, and carried me off. I believed it for 2 days. That was a hard thing to leave under a woman's candlestick. I know it." He turned the hat in his hands. "I had no right to ask you to trust me one day further than was sensible. But I could not bear to wake you and watch your face decide whether I was running to something or away from you. And I could not be sure, that night, which it would prove. I had never in my life done a thing for its own sake. I was afraid that if I woke you, you would talk me into staying small and safe in your corner, and I would let you, because being small in your corner was the sweetest thing that had ever happened to me." He stepped closer. The bees hummed. "And I had to be large exactly once, Delia, for you, so that no quill-faced man or beautiful one could ever again use you as the wall to climb to me. And now?" She could barely get it out. "Tuesday all England knows where you've been. You're the Duke of Renmore, and I'm the innkeeper he. Marry me." The bees worked on. The hot stone breathed. Somewhere within the church the parson had begun, faintly, the morning's first psalm, and it came out to them through the old oak door, beeswax warm and far away. "You can't," Delia said. "You've only just got loose of one bargain made for you. You'll not walk 3 feet and tie yourself into another. This is no bargain. No 2 men shook on this over claret. This is the first thing in 26 years that no one decided for me, and no one will thank me for, and no one approves." He took her hand, the one without the bond in it, and his grip was steady and warm and entirely certain, the grip of a man who has freed a seized swivel and propped a heavy bow and learned at last what his hands were for. "I love you, Delia Bray. I think I have loved you since you told me the box room would not do, and would not let me buy the small unseen thing I came in begging for, and gave me the dearest room you owned instead, and called it the cheapest so my pride could take it. I do not want a marchioness's blood to mend my credit. I want a woman who knows what a thing is worth. I want to pay you 6pence a night for the rest of my life, and never once leave the smallest room you have." The ghost smile, full at last, unguarded. "I asked you. The first night. For the least a man can have. You have rather comprehensively ruined that ambition. Marry me, and let me have the most." And Delia Bray, who had refused his money across the bread crock, and refused his name at her father's table, and refused £200 rather than sell the one honest thing that had walked through her door, found there was one thing in all that summer she had not the smallest wish to refuse. "You're a poor liar, Your Grace," she said. Through tears she had stopped fighting. "But you've turned out a fair hand at the truth." "Yes, God help us both. Yes. But you'll go on washing your own plate. For I'll not have a duke in my kitchen who thinks crockery beneath him." "I should not dream of it," he said, and drew her in, and kissed her there in her father's churchyard within sound of the bees. While the psalm came warm through the oak door, and the limes let down their slow gold dust upon them both, and the whole of Wick Abbas, peering shamelessly back over its Sunday shoulders, decided it had never in its life seen a better morning's work. The apples came on heavy that year, heavier than any summer since her father set the trees, and by the time they were red, the orchard had a duchess in it, though she would not let a soul in the parish call her so above a whisper. And she still raked the kitchen fire herself at first light, because, she said, no one else laid the turf the way it wanted laying. They were married quietly in the autumn at Wick Abbas, with Mrs. Pruitt crying into a copper-coloured apron she swore she had only borrowed for the dust, and the propped bough, when the fruit was picked, gave a full third of the orchard's yield off the one limb he had crutched with his own 2 hands that first burning morning. The master's room above the kitchen was theirs now, the dearest room she owned, given at last for nothing at all, and never again let to a stranger, and the bread warmth came up through its boards in the cold months exactly as her father had promised it would, 40 years before. "There's a drought off that orchard window your father never could cure," Mrs. Pruitt observed, the first frosty morning, setting down the cream. "And now we've a duke in the house, I suppose it'll go on uncured forever, for a duke's no more use with a putty knife than a churchwarden's cat." "This duke," said his Grace of Wrenmore, from the floor, where he was on his back with the casement frame in pieces and a green smear of lichen on a cuff he had not troubled to notice, "will thank you to fetch him the small chisel, and keep your opinions of churchwardens' cats to the dairy." "Wicked fools don't mend windows, Prue," Delia said, passing him the chisel. "You told me so yourself." "I told you a deal of things," the old woman allowed, "and I'll own about half of them came true. Which for a prophet is a handsome figure." She paused at the door, and the flat copper stare softened the way it always did, and always would. "He gave you the most a man can have, in the end, after asking for the least." She wiped her hands. "There's a justice in it I find I can almost bear." That evening, when the supper things were washed, by his own hand, square-cornered and patient, Delia climbed the crooked stair to their room with a single candle, and the third step sang beneath her, and behind her she heard it sing again under his heavier tread, and neither of them, any longer, had the smallest wish to keep a stare from announcing them. The orchard window held the last of the harvest light. The discharged bond lay folded in her father's box, and on the press, where a sealed and frightened letter had once lain 3 nights unsent, there was nothing now but a stub of beeswax candle, burned warm and low and freely, lighting a room that had wanted. All this while, only for somebody to be glad inside it. "6pence," she said, turning down the coverlet with 2 practiced flicks. "For the night?" he asked. "For the rest of them," said Delia, and blew out the candle, and the apple boughs creaked their slow contentment against the glass, and the smallest room in the house held the 2 of them the way it had been built to hold a person, left wholly alone, and never once for a moment lonely. If this one warmed you the way Delia's father's room warmed the bread, stay a while by the fire with us, subscribe, and tell me down in the comments which line you'd have given the smallest room in the house. There's another story waiting, and the kettle's already on.